Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So, if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where I read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode, and I give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of good times. So, stick around. So, if you remember last episode, we read the book called Words of Mormon. It is the only book in the Book of Mormon that is not a book. It is words. So, we read the Words of Mormon. I don't know. Anyways. But it was very cool because it was a little bit of an insert between the small and the large plates of the records that Mormon was abridging. And so it's kind of like a slingshot forward in time all the way to the end of the Book of Mormon, where Mormon is the one that's abridging. And you get a little bit of like what his life is like and what he's thinking as he's abridging. And it's very, very cool. And he also hypes up King Benjamin, because that is what we start the Book of Mosiah with, is King Benjamin. And so now that we've been hyped up a little bit on this good sir that we've never met, nor ever heard of, called King Benjamin, we are going to hear from King Benjamin. So yeah, I think without further ado, we read Mosiah chapter 1. And now there was no more contention in all the land of Zarahemla among all the people who belonged to King Benjamin, so that King Benjamin had continual peace all the remainder of his days. And it came to pass that he had 3 sons, and he called their names Mosiah, and Haloram, and Helaman, and he caused that they should be taught in all the language of his fathers, that thereby they might become men of understanding, and that they might know concerning the prophecies which had been spoken by the mouths of their fathers, which were delivered to them by the hand of the Lord. And he also taught them concerning the records which were engraven upon the plates of brass, saying, My sons, I would that ye should remember that were it not for these plates which contain these records and these commandments, we must have suffered in ignorance, even at this present time, not knowing the mysteries of God. So this is probably like the 4th time in the Book of Mormon where it is validated to us exactly why God had the family of Lehi go through all that they went through to get the plates of brass from Laban. Like, when you're reading in First Nephi, you're like, dang, they're really, like, putting in a lot of extra effort just to get these records. Like, they're walking super far, they're killing a guy after 3 attempts of trying to get the plates from him in other ways, and then returning from it potentially 200 miles all the way back. So, like, wow, like, really? Was it all worth that just for some records? But this is one of the many times that it is explained to us why it was so important. Because Lehi and his family were basically starting a new society, they were starting a new civilization, and they wanted to have records of where they came from, to know the mysteries of God, as King Benjamin puts it. And God knew this going into it. That's the cool part, is that we know that God knew all this when he had them get those records centuries ago. You know, he knew that it would have this big of an effect, and that's why he made it happen, is because he knew how much it would matter, and how many people's lives it would change. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like, you can kind of see God's hand all the way back in the past. Now you can finally see the effects of it hundreds of years in the future, which is really, really cool. For were it not possible that our father, Lehi, could have remembered all these things to have taught them to his children, except it were for the help of these plates? For he, having been taught in the language of the Egyptians, therefore, he could read these engravings and teach them to his children, that thereby they could teach them to their children, and so fulfilling the commandments of God, even down to this present time. I say unto you, my sons, were it not for these things which have been kept and preserved by the hand of God, that we might read and understand of his mysteries, and have his commandments always before our eyes, that even our fathers would have dwindled in unbelief, and we should have been likened to our brethren the Lamanites, who know nothing concerning these things, or even do not believe them when they are taught them, because of the traditions of their fathers, which are not correct. So this is really cool because he's just really, once again, reflecting on how cool it is that they have these records and how cool it is that God made sure that they had them, because it basically allowed them to live the life that they live. It allowed them to have the faith that they have, because he says, if our fathers didn't have these plates, they would probably not be following the faith, and therefore neither would we. Like, we would be lost. We would be following incorrect traditions like our brethren the Lamanites. He's really reflecting on how cool it is that we have these records, you know? O my sons, I would that ye should remember that these sayings are true, and also that these records are true. And behold, also the plates of Nephi, which contain the records and the sayings of our fathers from the time they left Jerusalem until now, and they are true, and we can know of their surety because we have them before our eyes. And now, my sons, I would that ye should remember to search them diligently, that ye may profit thereby, and I would that ye should keep the commandments of God, that ye may prosper in the land according to the promises which the Lord made unto our fathers. And many more things did King Benjamin teach his sons, which are not written in this book. So verse 7 is a very important verse. I actually had it underlined in my copy, because it says, remember to search them, the scriptures, diligently, that ye may profit thereby. I mean, that's King Benjamin telling his kids to read and study the scriptures. And he's telling them to feast on his words and to learn from them and to allow the words of God written by his prophets to change them. And I think that is one of the many goals of this podcast. And it came to pass that after King Benjamin had made an end of teaching his sons, that he waxed old, and he saw that he must very soon go the way of all the earth. Therefore he thought it expedient that he should confer the kingdom upon one of his sons. Therefore he had Mosiah brought before him, and these are the words which he spake unto him, saying, My son, I would that ye should make a proclamation throughout all this land among all this people, or the people of Zarahemla, and the people of Mosiah who dwell in the land, that thereby they may be gathered together. For on the morrow I shall proclaim unto this my people out of mine own mouth, that thou art a king and a ruler over this people, whom the Lord our God hath given us. And moreover, I shall give this people a name, that thereby they may be distinguished above all the people which the Lord God hath brought out of the land of Jerusalem. And this I do, because they have been a diligent people in keeping the commandments of the Lord. And I give unto them a name that shall never be blotted out, except it be through transgression. So in the gospel, a lot of times you hear names being really, really important. Saul became Paul. In the temple we get new names, and how taking the name of Christ upon yourself is part of the gospel. It's part of faith. And there's so many things about names, and I think that has to do with self-identification. And President Nelson has talked a little bit about this, about like the labels that we should be applying to ourselves above everything else, like disciple of Christ, child of the covenant, etc. And I think that those two things, the self-identification that President Nelson talked about, and this naming the people of Nephi something because they've been so righteous, I think those are very similar, because what you call yourself really changes how you act, how you see yourself, what you do. And therefore I think that King Benjamin is kind of tapping into that principle a little bit that President Nelson has been talking about recently, about how we should be identifying ourselves with Christ. We should be taking his name upon us, and that has some importance, you know? Like, names clearly have some importance in the gospel because they come up so often, and like I said, King Benjamin, I think, is tapping into that, which is pretty interesting to see. Yea, and moreover I say unto you, that if this highly favored people of the Lord should fall into transgression, and become a wicked and an adulterous people, that the Lord will deliver them up, that thereby they become weak like unto their brethren, and he will no more preserve them by his matchless and marvelous power, as he has hitherto preserved our fathers. For I say unto you, that if he had not extended his arm in the preservation of our fathers, they must have fallen into the hands of the Lamanites, and become victims to their hatred. And it came to pass that after King Benjamin had made an end of these sayings to his son, that he gave him charge concerning all the affairs of the kingdom. And moreover he also gave him charge concerning the records which were engraven upon the plates of brass, and also the plates of Nephi, and also the sword of Laban, and the ball or director which led our fathers through the wilderness, which was prepared by the hand of the Lord, that thereby they might be led, every one according to the heed and diligence which they gave unto him. Therefore, as they were unfaithful, they did not prosper, nor progress in their journey, but were driven back, and incurred the displeasure of God upon them, and therefore they were smitten with famine and sore afflictions, to stir them up in remembrance of their duty. And now it came to pass that Mosiah went and did as his father had commanded him, and proclaimed unto all the people who were in the land of Zarahemla, that thereby they might gather themselves together, to go up to the temple to hear the words which his father should speak unto them. Imagine being Mosiah, and being a prince, essentially, because King Benjamin is, well, a king. And then your dad asking you to his office, or throne room, or I don't know, whatever, and walking up to you just being like, I'm gonna name you king, and I'm gonna proclaim it to the entire kingdom. So go, tell people to come to the temple tomorrow, and I will proclaim to the entire kingdom, to the entire land, that you are gonna be king. Now you have reign over all these records, and all these people, and all these lands. Good luck. Like, oh my goodness, that'll be terrifying. Next chapter is going to be the address from King Benjamin that he gives his kingdom, wherein he names Mosiah as king, but he also preaches about the doctrine, and he admonishes his people on certain things, and it's really, really good. So King Benjamin's address is a very famous part of the Book of Mormon, for good reason. So this chapter was a little bit of just a preamble to that, so we're kind of winding up for the punch there. But yeah, very exciting. So the stand-up verse for this chapter is going to be verse 3, which says, And he also taught them concerning the records which were engraven on the plates of brass, saying, My sons, I would that ye should remember that were it not for these plates which contain these records and these commandments, we must have suffered in ignorance, even at this present time, not knowing the mysteries of God. So I've already kind of rambled on about this verse and how cool it is, but I just wanted to re-emphasize that we can see God's hand working and shaping these people into who he needs them to be, even from the very beginning, because they get the plates from Laban in the first handful of chapters of 1st Nephi. It's very early on. And yet, its effects echo for centuries. Like, it has been over 2 centuries since Lehi left Jerusalem, and therefore since they got the plates. And people still think about it. It is still changing the lives of everyone in what has become their kingdom. And it is so cool how God had that foresight and how he has that eternal perspective to tweak something, to make a small decision early on that echoes. You know, it's so cool to see the power of God in that way and how he has such an eternal perspective. I feel like sometimes we forget how much he knows. Like when we pray, we look for an answer to our prayer, and if he doesn't answer it, then we're like, well, he's not real then, I guess. But no, he could have answered your prayer decades before you prayed it. You know, he could have answered your prayer years before you prayed it. And I think that is such a cool idea. So yeah, pretty good chapter, pretty short. It was pretty much just a preamble to the actual address of King Benjamin, which is, in my opinion, the coolest part of the Book of Mosiah. But yeah, it was good. It was actually very interesting. I never really noticed before how King Benjamin says he's going to give the people a name. Like, I'd never really thought about that. We kind of just read past those verses where he's like, yeah, I'm going to give these people a name, and it will only be blotted out through transgression. And so it was kind of cool to notice something that I'd never really noticed before, you know? And that is the joy of reading the Book of Mormon. You always notice something new. You always find something that you swear was not there before. So yeah, I think that's the episode for today. Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to have you around. So there's just a handful of links in the show notes I want to tell you about. So the first 3 are different digital versions of the Book of Mormon. So if you want to read along but you don't have your own copy, boom, now you do. One is a web version, 2 are app downloads. You know the drill. There's also a let me know what you learned link. So if you want to, well, let me know you learned, then you can. You can message me there with feedback or nerding out things, what have you. Send it all there. If you want to shoot me a few bucks as well, there's also a link down there where you can support the show. And also, we're on YouTube. So if you want to subscribe there, then you can. There may or may not be extra content on there. I'm not sure yet. So yeah, you can listen to the podcast on YouTube if you so desire. So I'll talk to you later. Bye.